So, just so we know, Yanela, you'll be doing the first class. Okay. Take it away whenever you're ready, Astrid.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Astrid Barragan, and we stand here strongly with
Wait one sec. Just wait for them building. Come on in, Elliot. Hurry up. Take a seat. They're starting. We just stopped so you get in.
Thank you.
You can either pick it up from that line or you can start all over.
Pick it up. With today's resolution, the U.S. federal government should not prohibit a person with a civil domestic violence restraining order from firearm ownership unless they are charged with convictions. Some of the terms of this resolution that I will be talking about will be civil domestic violence restraining order, the U.S. federal government, and what a conviction. So civil domestic violence is a domestic violence restraining order that can be granted against someone who has been abusive to you or your children. Abuse can be emotional or physical. It can happen anywhere, including online. Abuse can happen in different ways. These restraining orders stop someone from having any type of contact with you. Restraining orders can also be granted quickly without much evidence. The U.S. federal government is made up of three branches: the legislative branch, the judicial, and the executive. The system was established by our Constitution to not allow more than one branch to have more power than the other. Lastly, conviction. When somebody is convicted of they've been declared guilty of a criminal charge by the verdict of a jury or the decision of a judge. So I will be talking about why we need to change this and provide reasons to why our resolution should be adopted, and I will focus on problems within the community while my partner will focus on our resolution. So everyone is entitled to fair due process. Have you ever heard of the phrase innocent until proven guilty? Well, that is because we have an amendment that talks just about that. The Fifth Amendment states that every person who is going through criminal proceedings have their rights protected from self-incrimination and due process. It allows someone to go through a fair trial before having their life, their liberty, and their property taken away from them. A person could lose this constitutional right without a fair process. The 14th Amendment also talks about the due process. It prevents the court from taking away, like mentioned before, or prohibiting anyone from the right to life, liberty, and property without the due process, like mentioned before. The civil restraining order is not a criminal conviction. We cannot take somebody's constitutional right based on a civil process where a crime has not been proven to be committed. One of our institutional rights can be taken away. The Second Amendment talks about the rights to bear arms, to be able to protect ourselves for self-defense purposes, and the government cannot actively break the terms of this law. This will simply cause a slippery slope of our rights that can be taken away. Many people could abuse or misuse these restraining orders to help benefit themselves. Sometimes people that did not commit an act of violence, like stated before, a restraining order is usually granted quickly without much evidence. So do we truly know what happens in these types of situations like this until they are taken into trial? According to Stephen Brodin, who is a criminal defense lawyer, has been practicing for more than 30 years, he has stated that estimately 70% of these restraining orders are thought to be false. The majority of 85% of these filed against men, while remaining 15% are filed against women. And another one, in the law office of John McDonald, who is a trial attorney with 30 plus years of experience, has also stated that the court has issued 1.5 million false restraining orders every year. It is in highly emotional situations like divorce or even custody disputes.
Nice. Give it up. Stand behind your chair. Stay standing. Yanela, it is your time. You get a minute and a half to ask her a question.
I have a question. Which was the first and second speaker?
Astrid was first speaker and Mia is first speaker.
Okay.
All right, Yanela, minute and a half. Take it away.
So
if your friend had a restraining order from firearms, would you say you should have the right to own a gun? I believe that if I am associating myself with a friend who is capable of hurting me or people around me, then that would be my wrongdoing because I get to decide what type of friends and people that I have around me.
How about
if your daughter was placed in a situation where her boyfriend was being
abusive towards her, and you think you have the right to have a gun?
I would like to believe that I will raise my daughter in an environment where she knows the dangers and try not to involve herself in situations like that with partners that may in the future harm her or her well-being.
You said that the restraining order has been abused, and there is everyone's right is protected according to the Fifth Amendment. Give it up. All right, Mia, you are first up for the negative team. You get 4 minutes, and then Astrid will ask you questions.
All right, I would like to take the time to thank the judge in the gallery today. We, the negative team, strongly believe that the U.S. government should prohibit a person with a civil domestic violence restraining order from firearm ownership because of public safety concerns, an increased risk of harm, and the consistency with existing laws. There's an increased risk of harm to the victims of domestic violence abuse all around the world. According to the website through SBVC Debate, an article stated more than 50% of women who are murdered are killed by intimate partners, and most of these homicides are committed with guns. A 2003 study found that when an abusive man had an access to a gun, it increases the risk of intimate partner homicide by 400%. Women constitute many victims of intimate partner homicide, and almost 1/3 of children under the age of 13 who are murdered with a gun are killed in the context of domestic violence. Studies have shown that access to firearms in abusive relationships can significantly increase the risk of a death or a serious injury. In an article titled "Texas Struggles to Get Guns Away from the Domestic Violence Suspects," through the SBVC database, had a near-death incident which stated, although her partner was on probation for assaulting a coworker, which meant he wasn't legally allowed to possess firearms, he continued to amassing guns and using them to terrorize Robin. He threatened to kill her if she had left. Robin, who asked that her last name would not be used because she fears retaliation from her ex-partner's family, excused the violence, even as it escalated from holes punched in the wall to bruises beaten onto her body. She remembers the evening police came to her house in North Texas after a neighborhood call to report a particularly violent episode. Robin evaded the officers, questioning knowing the abuse that would awaited her when they left. Her abuser, whose father worked as a police official in Dallas area, hoped to become a police officer one day. Robin said he spoke to the police officer's language, avoiding accountability. Robin wasn't surprised when her ex-partner later pointed a .357 at her in their bedroom and pulled the trigger. The bullet barely missed her, but it was the final straw for Robin, who spent the next several weeks laying the groundwork to leave her abuser. Right. According to the title article named Attorney General William P. Barr announces the creation of a working group on prosecuting gun crimes founded through the SBVC database, stating federal law has long barred convicted felons as well as individuals subject to certain domestic violence protective orders or convicted of domestic violence misdemeanors from possessing firearms. Research shows that abusers with a gun in the home are 5 times more likely to kill their partners than abusers who don't have that same access to a firearm. And according to one recent study, more than half of America's mass shootings are cases of extreme domestic violence. And according to an article stated, Salvaging Federal Domestic Violence Guns Regulations in Buren's Wake, founded through the SBVC Database, domestic violence is pervasive in the United States. Today, nearly 20% are physically abused by their partner each minute. 23, that amounts to 10 million individuals experiencing domestic violence over the course of a year. In fact, domestic violence constitutes 21%.
Time. Good job. Give it up. Okay, stand behind your chair. Astrid, it is your time to cross, unless you want to take prep time.
No, I think I'm okay.
Okay. The lectern is yours. You get a minute and a half.
Out of all the cases that you stated, if when it resulted in the abusive partner murdering the victim, if they were a danger, how come they weren't convicted of a crime prior to them owning the victim?
I believe you're speaking on the first article that was reported, and she got grazed by a bullet. She wasn't killed.
What about the stats that you have talked about? Why weren't these criminals convicted before they were given these guns to murder their partners?
Possibly because they weren't believed, and with abusers, they can work their way around their words and manipulation with people.
Should someone lose a constitutional right without being convicted of a crime?
I believe there is reasoning that they should lose their right to having a firearm, because if they had a child and they were involved in that matter, they would want no harm and danger to them.
To be done to their child?
Yes.
Time. Give it up. Take a seat. Next up, we have Emmanuel. Emmanuel, you will go for your 4 minutes, and then Mia will ask you questions unless you guys want prep time.
Can you get like 30 seconds?
Sure.
Okay.
Very good, you're at 30.
Good morning, judges, audience, and fellow debaters. My name is Emmanuel Carrillo, and we stand in strong affirmation of today's resolution. The U.S. federal government should not prohibit a person with a civil domestic violence restraining order from firearm ownership unless they are charged or convicted. At its core, this debate is about protecting constitutional rights and due process. We cannot allow the government to take away a person's Second Amendment rights based on a civil order without them being formally charged or convicted of a crime to support our case. Went too far. So, we've talked about civil violence, U.S. government, restraining orders, and how they've been granted quickly, without conviction, without us being guilty. And the opposition side talked about public safety, increased harm with guns, and consistency within the laws. My 3 key points that I'm here to present are: first, the current policy undermines due process, allowing rights to be stripped without a criminal finding. Second, it sets a dangerous precedent for government overreach and misuse of civil orders. And third, There are better, more precise tools like red flag laws that can protect people without violating rights. For these reasons, we urge you to affirm the resolution. The process to get a restraining order, as previously mentioned, can be so easy, and to take away the right to a gun because of that is not only unconstitutional, but a misuse of that order. They are often issued without strong evidence or a full hearing. They can also be used in personal disputes, as said in the 2023 article, Misuse and Abuse of Restraining Orders in Divorce/Child Custody Cases, written by Scoresby Family Law. Far too often, one of the parties in a divorce or child custody case fabricates or exaggerates allegations of domestic violence in order to eject the other party from a common residence or to obtain de facto custody of common children by way of a restraining order. A restraining order is not a criminal charge or conviction, so the difficulty to dispute it the way of a criminal process requires is often not a given opportunity. Yet under federal law, it can still result in disarmament. I want to read a couple lines from the passage, U.S. Supreme Court upholds gun ban in domestic abuse cases, posted by Financial Times in 2024, written by Stefania Palma. In it, he, Justice Clarence Thomas, lamented the ban's broad scope and lack of process, adding that the Second Amendment does not merely narrow the government's regulatory power, it is a barrier placing the right to keep and bear arms off its limits to the government. Even one of the Supreme judges deemed it unconstitutional to take away the right to bear arms. He himself is saying that the law is too general and affects too many people. The Second Amendment is supposed to protect our right to bear arms, and they shouldn't be taken away, something like that, without strong legal judgment. Justification. One way to prevent that is through red flag laws. As we all know, there will never be enough regulation, so I am here approaching with a solution. Amy Barnard said in the article, Violence Prevention by Public Affairs at UC Davis in 2023. Red flag laws are a tool law enforcement and others can use when somebody is clearly at high risk of doing something with a firearm, but they can't be arrested because no crime has been committed and they don't appear to need a mental health hold to qualify for it.
All right, stand behind your chair. And Nia, it is your cross.
Okay. Would you say that there should be due process if a person yelled, for instance, for their freedom of speech, if they yelled, I have a gun in public, should they not be having a restraining order since it was in the public of many people?
Can you rephrase your question? I don't quite understand.
So you said due process. So for instance, for freedom of speech, if a person had a gun and they yelled in the public saying, I have a gun, should they not be having a restraining order in the public of many people?
So restraining orders are only for you yourself, but you're straight of an individual. The whole public is not going to file a restraining order against one person. Yeah, freedom of speech, right? You're interrupting the peace, so that's a completely different law being broken when you yell you have a gun in public.
Even though we have the right to bear arms with the Second Amendment, is there a line that needs to be drawn, or the use of Second Amendment being justifiable for anything or anyone?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Even though we have the right to bear arms with the Second Amendment, is there a line that needs to be drawn for the use of the Second Amendment being justifiable for anything or anyone?
No, I do believe there are limits to what the Second Amendment right grants us. It's not a completely unlimited right, especially not.
Time. All right, next up we have Yaneli. Yaneli, you get your 4 minutes. Hurry up and sit down, please, sir. And then Emmanuel will ask you questions.
Thank the gallery and the judge for being here. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're debating the resolution. The U.S. federal government should prohibit a person with civil domestic violence restraining order from firearm ownership unless they are charged and convicted. I will refute the affirmative side when the affirmative points of precise tools, restraining orders, and their Second Amendment being taken away. My partner and I had focused on the homicides being created, the Second Amendment not being challenged, and the public safety for the public. The Second Amendment won't be taken away from those that are violent and don't really need a gun. According to News 9 on June 2024, Supreme Court held on beginning ownership states the court ruled 8-1 that a person who has been found by a court to pose credible threat to the physical safety of another may be temporarily disarmed consistent with the Second Amendment. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote. Law enforcement will benefit from prohibiting firearm ownership. The U.S. Department of Justice article states this new provision affects the law enforcement in three interrelated ways. First, it will assist in preventing those individuals who have demonstrated a propensity for domestic violence from obtaining a firearm. Second, it will assist the law enforcement decreasing the possibility of deadly violence. Finally, it will serve as a federal prosecution tool in certain situations where alternatives have failed. They are higher with allowing domestic violence persons that own guns. Another threat to domestic abuse survivors, Katie and New York newspapers in July 2023 states, the stakes could not be higher. The Center of Disease Control and Prevention's National Intimate Partner in Sexual Violence Survey indicates that about 41% of women and 26% of men in the United States have experienced sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner, and reported being affected by it during their lifetime. According to the U.S. crime reports, about 1 of the 5 homicide victims is killed by an intimate partner. Linda, and how far will the court go to America? The New York Times in April 2023 points out, the government's petition points out that there are more than 1 million acts of domestic violence in the United States every year, and the presence of a gun in a house with a domestic abuser increases the risk of homicide sixfold. As you guys recall, as you guys recall in the video we watched during class, the U.S. versus Rahimi explained in the YouTube video, Rochelle states that homicide for women from their intimate partner is more commonly women, and most of the homicides involve guns. You said it's freedom of speech to be holding a gun but however, the guy Rahimi did not use this in the correct way when he pointed out a gun in Whataburger, shooting in the sky just because his friend's car got denied. Overall, there should be limits to access of guns for those that do have a restraining order from firearm ownership unless they are charged or convicted, and they should not be having a gun.
All right, stand behind your chair, face forward. Emmanuel, it's your cross.
Can you get another 30 seconds?
Yep. Use 30, but you still have another 30 if you want to use it now.
Yeah, I'll use it.
Alright. Face forward, you know. There we go. Take it away.
If someone is truly dangerous and you fear for your life because they have a gun, why haven't you pressed further charges and they've been arrested?
Well, if they are pressed for, even if they are pressed, what's it called? Charges, because, Rahimi said that his girlfriend was already abused, and even though he had already had a gun in that situation, he still got a hold of another gun, and that's when he exploded in the Whataburger restaurant.
Okay, then why only go for a restraining order? Why not go further than that? Why not go with a criminal restraining order, which lets them get 10 years of no contact at all with that said person, instead of just a simple no contact?
But in this case, it was not the girlfriend that was being targeted. He acted out in a public place where no one had a restraining order against him.
So you're comparing two different laws being broken and trying to combine them into one. One being him acting out in public with a firearm, disrupting the peace. But how does that affect her domestic violence? How does that affect her domestic violence case?
Let's say after that incident, he still had the gun. What if he comes back?
I wish we could hear the end. Give it up. Good job. Alright, take a seat. I'm gonna give you guys a minute, and then we will get into rebuttals. It will go Mia, Astrid, Yaneli, and end with Emmanuel. So I'm gonna give you guys a minute and a half, because you guys didn't take any prep time. Right? Two minutes, Nan.
Alright. The individuals who engage in domestic violence attacks should not legally obtain firearms, which would keep our communities safe. There's an assumption that of these victims being weak or passive, other outside parties place blame on the victims or stereotyping victims. Individuals who are family members of the victims wonder how far the U.S. Supreme Court will go with allowing guns to be in the hands of people who use it inappropriately or harmfully. In conclusion, prohibiting individuals with civil domestic violence restraining order from owning firearms domestic violence abuse is a major step in keeping safety net and well-being of individuals and communities. It is undeniable of the risks of having firearms ownership of an abuser who has demonstrated a pattern of abusive acts and behavior of such persons with access to a deadly weapon. We reduce the probability of escalation through violence by the removal of firearms from those under restraining orders, which would further protect victims from potential harm, death, and uphold the public safety. This policy would coincide with existing guns control measures that strengthen commitment to prevent domestic violence-related injuries. Lastly, Those who with firearm ownership with a history of domestic violence abuse are a matter of protecting the victims and ensuring a safer and more just society. Thank you.
Give it up. All right, Astrid.
Although the opposing side has argued, well, what about our safety? What if we wait too long for somebody to get hurt? I understand those concerns and the fear, but the principle is here that we do not punish people based on just what they might do. If the danger is so immediate, then they should be arrested and charged under a criminal law. Protective measures can definitely take place, but they can be done without stripping somebody's rights indefinitely. If we allow the government to take a constitutional right away from the people, how many others will follow? Will we no longer have freedom of speech or expression or even freedom of religion? Would we have freedom to vote? This may create a loophole in our Constitution to let the government do what they want with our rights. Wouldn't you like to have a fair chance of life and not have anyone strip it from you in the form of property, let alone your rights? We must remember, rights are not a privilege. They are not something we take away simply because someone seems too dangerous. If they are truly a danger, charge them. Convict them. Use the legal system built to do just that. Stand with me today and allow this resolution to pass, because we are the people and we decide what we do with our rights. Thank you.
Give it up. Yaneli?
The Second Amendment gives a person with a civil domestic violence restraining order from firearm ownership, giving the right to those who already have the instinct to hurt a loved one with no arm, meaning they have no self-control, and mental health issues can take in place. And what will happen if they are allowed to use? What will happen if they are allowed to use a gun and being out in public, where they continue hurting people? Family and public safety are being endangered in public spaces. How would they be protected, and what would they I think because I can't find it.
Okay, give it up. Thank you, Manuel.
So the opposition are adamant on public safety, right? They keep referring to it as, oh, these guys have guns, they're in public, shooting up all these restaurants, they're endangering the public. But we have even taken away guns from our military. People who have worked with guns for years. There's an article, title of the article is, "Can a veteran with PTSD own a gun?" Posted by Watermark Keith Veterans. While the PTSD diagnosis alone does not automatically disqualify a veteran from gun ownership, certain factors associated with the diagnosis can lead to a VA report for the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. This report may limit a veteran's current and future access to firearms. So we know not everyone should be able to have one, right? Guns are not toys, lives cannot be returned. But no one can guarantee safety in every case. We also can't guarantee justice if we allow the government to take away rights without proper legal standards. The solution is faster investigations and better red flag laws, not sweeping bans. Prevention is important, but it must be done in a constitutional and targeted way. Taking away rights from someone who hasn't been charged or convicted isn't prevention. It's a shortcut that violates civil rights and liberties. So that's why we support red flag laws, which allow temporary disarmament based on current provable behavior, not just the legal status like a restraining order that may have been granted without a full hearing. Thank you.
Stand up, shake each other's hands. Well done.